In a small town, there was a cozy diner known for its warm meals and even warmer hospitality. Sarah, a young waitress in her 20s, worked there with a passion for making every customer feel special. She wasn't just serving food. She believed in spreading kindness with every smile and every conversation. Whether it was offering a cup of coffee or taking a few extra minutes to chat, Sarah went above and beyond for anyone who walked through those doors. On one particular day, as Sarah was busy taking orders and delivering food, the door to the diner creaked open, and a homeless man stepped inside. His clothes were ragged, his face tired and worn from days on the street. He hesitated, scanning the room nervously before his eyes landed on Sarah. Without a second thought, she knew this was her chance to do something kind for someone in need. As the homeless man stood there, looking uncertain, Sarah walked over to him with a warm smile. She could tell he hadn't eaten in a while, and the concern in his eyes made her heart go out to him. "Can I get you something to eat?" she asked gently. The man hesitated before mumbling that he didn't have any money to pay for a meal. Without missing a beat, Sarah reassured him, "Don't worry about it, I'll take care of it." She quickly went to the kitchen, placing an order for a warm meal. The man's face softened with gratitude, and he muttered a quiet thank you as Sarah returned with a steaming plate of food. As he began to eat, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Helping others was part of who she was, and she knew that sometimes a small act of kindness could mean everything to someone in need. Sarah couldn't stand to see anyone go hungry, especially not someone who clearly needed help. As the homeless man hesitated, she could see the weight of his struggles in his eyes. She knew he wasn't just hungry for food, he was likely hungry for kindness too. Sarah smiled warmly, trying to make him feel at ease in a place where he might not have expected any comfort. "Don't worry about paying, I'll take care of it," she said, her voice soft but firm. She could see the surprise in his eyes, but he didn't argue. Instead, he simply nodded, his expression a mix of relief and disbelief. She hurried to the kitchen, explaining the situation to the chef. The kitchen staff was used to Sarah's big heart, and without hesitation, they prepared a simple but hearty meal, something that would fill him up and give him warmth. Sarah carried the steaming plate back to his table and set it down gently. "Here you go," she said. "Take your time." The man looked up at her, his face softening, and for a moment there was a silence between them. He reached for his fork, and as he began to eat, his hands trembled slightly. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah smiled, feeling her heart swell with compassion. She didn't need to know his story to know that this was the right thing to do. It wasn't about money or recognition. It was about offering someone a moment of dignity. As he ate, Sarah went back to serving the other customers, but something inside her felt different. Something about this simple act of kindness felt special. As Sarah returned to her usual duties, moving from table to table and serving customers, she couldn't help but glance over at the homeless man every now and then. She watched him quietly eating, his demeanor slowly shifting from anxious to calm. It wasn't just the food that seemed to comfort him. There was something about the way Sarah had treated him without judgment or hesitation. It made him feel human again, not like the invisible person he often felt like in the outside world. After a few moments, the man put down his fork, wiped his mouth, and looked up at Sarah as she walked by. "Excuse me," he called out softly. Sarah turned, and she was met with his eyes that seemed to carry the weight of countless struggles. I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You didn't have to do this, but you did. It's been so long since anyone's treated me like this." Sarah smiled and shrugged. "Everyone deserves a little kindness," she replied gently. But the man wasn't done. "No," he insisted, his voice stronger now. "I mean it. What you did, it means more than you can imagine." Sarah nodded, feeling her heart swell with emotion. The simple meal she had given him had clearly meant so much more than just food. It was a reminder that kindness can make a world of difference in someone's life, no matter how small the gesture may seem. The man stood up slowly, looking around as if considering something, then gave Sarah a grateful nod. "Thank you," he said again before returning to his meal. Sarah, moved by his words, simply gave a small wave as she continued her work, knowing she had made a difference, even in this small moment as Sarah went back to her routine. Serving other customers and managing her tasks, she felt a warmth in her heart that was hard to ignore. The moment with the homeless man, though brief, had left a lasting impact on her. It wasn't about the food or even the thank you he had given her. It was the feeling of doing something right, something pure. It was the kind of small act that reminded her why she loved working in the diner in the first place. It wasn't about the tips or the busy rush of orders. It was about making connections, about showing kindness when it was needed the most. The rest of the day passed like any other. Sarah chatted with regular customers, made sure every dish was perfect, and smiled at those who needed it. But the homeless man's quiet gratitude lingered in the back of her mind, making her feel as if, for a brief moment, she had truly made a difference in someone's life. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah took a short break, grabbing a cup of coffee in the back. She leaned against the counter, looking out the window. The day had been normal, but somehow it felt different. The simple act of kindness had filled her with a sense of peace, reminding her of the power of compassion, no matter how small. Little did she know, that warm feeling was just the beginning. What happened next would change her life forever. About 30 minutes later, as the diner began to quiet down and the rush of lunch settled, Sarah noticed the homeless man was gone. She hadn't seen him leave, but his table was now empty, and the plate she had given him earlier was cleaned spotless. She figured he had just finished and left, probably to continue on with his difficult day. It was just another fleeting moment of kindness, she thought. However, as Sarah wiped down the counter and prepared for the evening crowd, she was approached by the diner's manager, Mr. Jacobs, who had a curious look on his face. He leaned in slightly, glancing around as if to make sure no one else was listening. "Sarah," he said in a low voice, "I think you need to know something." Sarah gave him a puzzled look. "What's going on?" she asked. Mr. Jacobs paused for a moment, then spoke again, his voice filled with a mix of surprise and awe. "The man you just helped, he's not who you think he is." Sarah's eyes widened in confusion. "What do you mean?" "That man, he's a local businessman, a pretty wealthy one actually. He owns a couple of properties in the city and has been looking for someone with the kind of kindness and heart you just showed. He wanted to see how you would treat him, not as a customer, but as a person." Sarah blinked, trying to process the news. "Wait, what? You're telling me he's not homeless?" Mr. Jacobs nodded. "No, he's not. He came in here earlier just to test the kind of person you are. He was so impressed by your kindness that he asked me to tell you he wants to give you a reward." Sarah stood there in stunned silence. She hadn't expected anything in return. She had just acted on instinct, but what happened next would completely change her view on kindness. As Sarah stood there, still trying to wrap her head around what Mr. Jacobs had just said, the manager smiled knowingly. "He left a message for you. He's gone, but he wanted to make sure you knew how much your kindness meant to him." Before Sarah could ask more questions, Mr. Jacobs pulled out an envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. The envelope was thick, and it was sealed with an elegant wax stamp. Sarah took it hesitantly, still in disbelief. "Open it," Mr. Jacobs urged, clearly excited for her. With shaking hands, Sarah broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. As she read the contents, her eyes widened in amazement. The letter, written in a neat and formal hand, explained that the man she had helped was none other than Charles Winters, a successful businessman who had been watching for someone genuine and kind-hearted. He mentioned that he had been touched by Sarah's selflessness and wanted to reward her for her generosity in a way that would change her life forever. Along with the letter was a check, made out to Sarah for an amount far beyond anything she could have imagined. An amount that would not only cover her bills for months but could also allow her to chase her dreams, whatever they might be. The letter also mentioned that Charles had a position available at one of his companies and that he wanted Sarah to consider taking it if she was interested. Overwhelmed, Sarah looked up from the letter, her heart racing. Mr. Jacobs watched her, a proud smile on his face. He's a man of his word. You've earned this. Sarah felt a whirlwind of emotions, shock, joy, and gratitude. She hadn't expected anything in return. She had simply acted out of kindness. But now she realized that sometimes, when you do the right thing for the right reasons, life has a way of surprising you with rewards you never saw coming. Sarah stood there for a moment, still holding the letter and check in her hands, as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. She had never expected anything in return for the simple act of feeding a hungry man. But now, here she was, holding an opportunity that could change her entire life. The check, the letter, and the offer. It was more than she could have ever dreamed of. She turned to Mr. Jacobs, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say. He chuckled softly. You don't have to say anything. You did what was right. That's more than most people do. And look where it got you. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back. She hadn't been looking for praise or rewards. She had simply wanted to help. But now, she realized that acts of kindness, no matter how small, could have a ripple effect that reaches farther than you might ever imagine. The universe, it seemed, had a way of rewarding those who gave without expecting anything in return. With the check in hand and the job offer on the table, Sarah felt a new sense of purpose and excitement. She thought about all the possibilities, now open to her, the new opportunities she could pursue, and the way this act of kindness had changed not only the man's life but hers as well. She looked down at the letter one more time, a smile spreading across her face. The unexpected turn of events was proof that sometimes, doing the right thing can lead to something truly extraordinary. As Sarah walked out of the diner that evening, she knew that her life was about to take a new direction, one where kindness would continue to guide her, just as it always had. As Sarah walked out of the diner that evening, the night air felt different, fresh, almost as if the world itself was giving her a new beginning. She thought back to the homeless man and the simple meal she had served. It was a reminder that kindness doesn't always need to be grand or calculated. Sometimes the smallest acts, like offering a warm meal or a moment of compassion, could create ripples that reach places we could never imagine. Sarah had always believed in the power of kindness, but now she saw firsthand how it could come back in the most unexpected ways. That one decision to help someone in need had led to a reward beyond anything she had ever hoped for. She realized that no matter how difficult life might seem, there's always a chance to make it better for someone else, even in the smallest of ways. As she headed home, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected blessing, for the lesson in generosity, and for the reminder that the world still had a lot of good in it. And she promised herself that no matter where her new journey took her, she would always stay true to the kindness she had shown that day. After all, in a world that can often feel uncertain, kindness is one thing we can all give, no matter what. The end.